Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Shabbos Daf Samach Dalid begins in the middle of a discussion about what to do if there is an idol worshiper living together with a bunch of Jews in a mavoy, and he refuses to allow schiras reshus. What kind of solution could you find? The Gemara has already seen one solution. The Gemara is going to ask questions on it and propose a second solution. The Gemara, based on that, will launch into a discussion of drunkenness and when you're allowed to daven, when you're not allowed to daven, how you get rid of the effects of drunkenness. That'll take us further into a discussion about what happens when you made too much money too fast, how you avoid an ayin hara. Then we'll go back to the concept of drunkenness. Gemara will quote a lengthy brisa, which learns a lot of halachos, spanning various different things from the actions of Rabbi Gamliel. Okay. So first of all, we had seen a case where there was a group of Jews living together in a chatzar and in a mavoy, and they wanted to make a shetufei mevois, and there was a guy there, idol worshiper, and he did not allow them to rent his rights to the mavoy. This is a problem because Chazal said you can't make an erev chaseres or shetufei mevois if there is an idol worshiper there. It does not allow you to rent rishos. So what are you supposed to do? So the Gemara had one solution where Abaye had said that they should all the Jews should be mevatel rishos to one person. Then it's like there's only one person living there. We'll go like the opinion of Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov that as long as there's only one Jew living there, it's not a problem if there's an idol worshiper there. The Gemara is asking now. The Gemara says in the beginning of the daf, how could you do that? That means that you're allowing people to carry here without any erev chaseres. The erev chaseres and the shetufei mevois doesn't help. And you don't even have to make one because you don't have multiple Jews living here at all. You just have one. Everybody who's mevatel the rishos to him. People are going to think that you're allowed to. It'll defeat the purpose of erev chatzeres and shetufei mevois. The whole purpose of that is that a place which is jointly owned you can't carry. And here you have a place that's jointly owned, but we made a shtick that it's not really jointly owned, and now everybody's going to carry in it without an erev. We're going to mess up the concept of erev. This chatzer, the people living here will forget the idea of erev. So the Gemara says, no, so we'll make an erev. The Gemara says, you're going to make an erev. Then they're going to think that an erev works when there's an idol worshiper joining part of the erev, living in the mavoi together with you. So the Gemara says we're going to make an announcement. We're going to tell people that there's an erev here, but there's a thing called the erev, but the erev is not what works because the erev doesn't work when there's an idol worshiper involved. The Gemara says that announcement is going to work for now. What's going to be in a generation or two? People are going to forget all about it. We have to come up with long-term solutions here. Gemara says, Rava says there's a different solution here. One of the Jews who lives there should cozy up to this idol worshiper, should become friends with him, until he allows him to put down his things in his chatzar, in his personal area. Once he does that, he becomes like a worker who has permission to stay in the guy's house. We know that the halach is that if a guy or an idol worshiper hires a Jew as a worker, and that worker is allowed lodging in his estate, as long as that Jewish worker agrees to the erev, or he allows schiras reshus, that's okay. That's good enough to allow the erev chaseres or shetufei mevois to exist. Somebody who has permission to enter this guy's reshus gives his permission. That's okay. And this is the concept which our Amanar and schiras reshus are based on. We rent from the electric company or the fire department people who have permission to enter the houses of the goyim around us, and that's how we perform schiras reshus, so that we can do an erev chaseres. Now, the Gemara here quotes the source of this halacha, that a worker who has rights to enter the reshus is allowed to give reshus and make an erev chatzeres. And where it quotes of Yehuda Mashmuel, who says that even if you have just somebody who rents space or somebody who is a fruit picker working for the guy, that's enough as long as he agrees to join the erev, that's okay. So now the Gemara says, Abaye said to Rav Yosef, this that the worker or the renter of the guy is allowed to be the one to join the erev on behalf of the guy, does that work only as a kula to allow people to join the guy's reshus into the erev, or does it even work l'chumra? Let's say there's a whole bunch of people. There's a group of, let's say, 5 Jews who rent or are workers and have lodging in the house of the idol worshiper, and not all of them join the erev. Not all these Jews who are working there, not all of them join the erev. Does that mess up the erev? We know that the rule of an erev chatzeres that if there's somebody who has rights there and he doesn't join, that messes it up, that it's no good. So does this count? Is this the same thing? They all have rights, so they all have to join? Or no, they're all staying in the house of the idol worshiper, and somebody in the idol worshiper's house has joined the erev, and therefore they all considered to be together and having joined. So Rav Yosef said, in all of Hilchos Eruvin, we only go l'kula, we don't go l'chumra, and therefore it's not a problem. We didn't create these rules in order to say chumra. Now the Gemara has just quoted a halacha of Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel is the one who said that the renter or the fruit picker is the only one who has to join the Erev. Rav Nachman said on that, what a wonderful piece of information that is, what a wonderful shmaitza, what a wonderful halacha that is. However, Rav Yehuda Mishmul said a different thing. He said that somebody who drinks a revius, that's a quarter of a loig of wine, he cannot paskin halacha. That Rav Nachman was not pleased. He said that is not a good halacha. I don't like that because I find myself, I can't even think at all until I've drunk at least a revius of wine. So Gemara says, Rava said to Rav Nachman, how could you say such a thing? How could you choose and pick which halachas of somebody you like? Don't you know that Rav Acha bar Chanina said on the pasuk V'roye zoynes ya'abed hain, the shepherd of the zoynes will lose wealth. Now the zoynes he interpreted al pidrush as zu na'a zu einay na'a. That's zoynes zu na'a. Somebody who says this halacha I like, this halacha I don't like, this statement of a chacham I like, this statement of a chacham I don't like, because my abed hain is going to lose a tremendous wealth of Torah. So Rav Nachman said, I hear, okay, I'm taking it back, I won't say it anymore. Now on the concept of drinking wine, so the Gemara continues, where it says, Rav Huna said that somebody who is drunk, shasoi, is not allowed to say tefillah, and if he does, tefillah does count. It is a valid Shemona Esrei, even though he shouldn't have. However, somebody who's a shikar, somebody who's really intoxicated, he's not allowed to daven, and if he does daven, his tefillah is a tayev, it's considered to be repulsive. So Gemara says, okay, what is exactly the definition of a drunk versus intoxicated? What's a shasoi, what's a shikar? So Gemara brings an incident to explain this. Gemara says that Rabbi Abba bar Shumani and Rav Menashe bar Yirmiyah Migifti were parting from each other in a bridge over the river called Yufti. And we know that they say that if you're parting from your friend, you should leave as dvar halacha. That way you'll always remember your friend every time you say over that halacha, which obviously happens often. We chazer all our halachas all the time. Then you'll remember who taught you this halacha, and you'll quote your friend, and you'll mention his name, and that's how you will recall him. So the Gemara here records what each one said to the other. The Gemara doesn't record which said which, but the Gemara says that one of them said, what is the definition of a shasoi and what's a shikur? So he said the definition is as follows. A shasoi is somebody who cannot speak in front of the king. A shasoi is somebody who could still speak in front of the king. A shikur is somebody who's too confused to be able to talk to the king. That's how you define it. The other one said, I'll tell you the following thing. Somebody who has received a windfall of wealth. What's an example of that? Somebody who knew of somebody who was a ger, a convert. Now, a convert loses all his inheritors. When he converts to Judaism, he's considered to be born fresh, and he doesn't have any relatives. So if he dies in that state, his possessions become hefker. So somebody goes and he is machzik in those possessions. He acquires those possessions. Other people will be jealous of him. They'll give him an ayin hara. So what should he do in order to avoid that ayin hara? He should use some of that money to write a sefer Torah, hire somebody to write a sefer Torah. That'll avoid that ayin hara. Now the Gemara continues on that subject. Before going back to the concept of being drunk, the Gemara says, Rav Shesha says, even somebody who just marries a woman who has a lot of possessions and therefore he gets a windfall that way, should also do something to avoid ayin hara, like writing a sefer Torah. Rava says, even if he just did a good deal and he made a lot of money, he should do it. Rav Papa says, even if he just found something in the street, he should use part of that money for that. That way he'll avoid ayin hara. Menachem Bar Yitzchak says you don't even have to write a sefer Torah, you could just write tefillin, and that's also good enough. The Gemara says, what's the source of this? How do you know that this will avoid ayin hara? Rav Chanin and possibly Rav Chanina said, like the pasuk says, V'yider Yisrael neder, Klal Yisrael made a promise when they were being attacked, and they said that if we'll win this war, then we will give some of these things as a cherem to Hashem and karbanos, and therefore we see that we do make things as a neder in order to help avoid problems, specifically in war, and certainly that can apply to ayin hara as well. So the Gemara now goes back to the concept of drunkenness. The Gemara says, how do you get rid of drunkenness? Somebody who wants to be able to say a tefillah or to paskin halacha. Both of these things we've seen you can't do if you're drunk, or if you have any alcohol in your system, or a small amount of alcohol in the system. So how do you get rid of this? So Rami Bar Abba says, here's what you do. You walk a mill, or you sleep. Walking a mill or sleeping, that takes off the effects of the alcohol. So Rav Nachman says the name Rabbi Bar Avua, that's only if somebody only drank one revius of wine. If he drank a quarter of a log of wine, and that's not a lot, that's about 4 ounces of wine. But if somebody drank more than that, then those two activities will actually make things worse. If he walks a lot, it'll make him more confused, and if he sleeps, that's when it really becomes drunk based on that amount of wine. So therefore, he shouldn't do those things. Those things only work if somebody drank a revius or less. Now the Gemara quotes a lengthy brisa with the story with Rabban Gamliel, and based on that, we're going to end up with a kasha on this idea. So what does the brisa say? The brisa says it was a story with Rabban Gamliel was riding on a donkey, and he was traveling from Akko to Kziv, and Rabbi Eloi was traveling just behind him, and they were walking on the road. They were traveling along the road, and they saw a couple of loaves of bread. So Rabbi Gamliel said, Eloi, pick up the loaves of bread from the road. Okay, he did so. They continued going on further, and they saw a guy. So Rabbi Gamliel referred to the guy by his name. He said, Mavgai, by his name. He said, take these loaves of bread from Eloi. So Rabbi Eloi came close to him, and he said to him, where are you from? He said, I'm from a town of huts, a place where people live in huts. It's not even a city at all. He said, what's your name? He said, my name is Vagai, just like the other rabbi called me. So he said, have you ever met Rabban Gamliel before that he knows your name? He said, no, I never saw him before. I don't know how he knows my name. So now the author of the Bryce interrupts and says, we learn from here a lot of things. We learn from here, first of all, Rabban Gamliel had Ruach HaKodesh, that's how he knew the man's name, and we learned 3 halachas. First of all, you cannot pass by if you see bread on the side of the road or food. You cannot pass by and leave it in a state of bizayin. You have to pick it up. Second halacha we see is that the bread is forbidden. Because the majority of the people in the town are goyim, we have to assume the bread comes from the majority, and the bread comes from goyim, and therefore it's forbidden, and that's why you have to get rid of it and give it to the guy. The next thing we see is that since this incident happened right after Pesach, we see that chametz, which belonged to a guy, over Pesach is permitted to have hana from it, because Rabban Gamliel is having hana by giving this to the guy. He's getting goodwill from Mavgai, from the guy, the guy. Okay. Now, what happened? The Brisa returns to the story. Rabban Gamliel continued on his way. He got to Kziv, and once he got there, somebody came to ask Rabban Gamliel to help take off a neder. He had made a neder. He wanted a Pesach. He wanted the Chacham Rabban Gamliel to take off his neder, his vow that he made. So he said to Rav Eloi, did we drink a revius of Italian wine? He said, yes, we did. He said, well, if we drank a revius of Italian wine, we cannot paskin halacha like this. We cannot help him. So what should we do? We should follow us until we get to a situation where the effects of the wine has passed, then we'll be able to paskin halacha. So they continued walking, and the guy went behind him for 3 mil, traveled 3 mil, till they came to Sulma Shel Tzur. That is the steep mountain near the valley of Tzur. When they got there, Gamliel got off the donkey. He put on his talis. He sat down. He listened to the man's neder, and he was matir neder for him. So the Brisa now says we learn a lot of halachas over here. First of all, we see that a quarter of a loig, 1 revius of Italian wine makes a person drunk, and he cannot paskin. Next, we see that person who is drunk is not allowed to paskin. Next, we see that traveling this amount on the road, 3 mil on the road, takes off the effects of the wine. We also see that you're not allowed to be meifir neder, you're not allowed to be matir neder. This is really, you're not allowed to help a person get out of his neder, not while you're riding on a donkey, and not while you're traveling, and not when you're standing. You have to actually get off and sit down. Now, that's the Brisa. The Gemara says, based on this, we see that you need 3 mil to take off the effects of wine, not 1 mil, like Rami Bar Abba had said before. The Gemara says this difference was Italian wine. Italian wine is stronger, that takes 3 mil. The Gemara says, hold on a second. We had said before that the solution of traveling only works for 1 revius of wine exactly. If Italian wine is stronger, that's equal to more than a revius of wine. And more than a revius of wine, we said that traveling actually makes it worse. So how could they travel 3 mil and say that's enough? Traveling is going to make it worse. So Gemara says this was different because they weren't walking. Walking, that's where it makes it worse. Riding on the donkey doesn't make it worse. Gemara says, oh, well, if that's the case, so then you can answer our previous kasha also. Maybe the reason why they needed 3 mil is because they were riding. Riding takes longer to clear out the wine from your system than walking. Walking is 1 mil and riding is 3 mil. Okay, now the Gemara goes further and analyzes more of the incidents over here. The Gemara says, how could it be that Rabban Gamliel had to get off the donkey in order to paskin the neder? We have a statement of Rav Nachman that says you're allowed to be made for neder, whether you're traveling, whether you're standing still, whether you're riding. So the Gemara says it's dependent on a machlekes tanoim how you take off a neder. A machlekes tanoim, do you have to find some way of showing the person who made the neder that he wouldn't have made the neder had he known something? Do you have to find someone where he regrets he made the neder and he made it under false pretenses of some sort? Rav Gamliel held you do, and therefore you have to have yeshiva das, you have to be thinking clearly in order to do that. That's why you have to sit down, and that's why you have to not be under the influence of wine. The other brisa, the other opinion says, no, you just say mutalach, 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 you don't have to find something that doesn't require too much thought. Now the Gemara says, what actually was Rav Gamliel's Pesach here? How did he actually find a way to get out of this neder? So he said to him, listen here, mister, do you know there is a pasuk in Mishnah that says, Yesh boite kemat keres cher v'lo shayin chachamim marpe. Now the simple pshat there is that there are some people who speak knives and daggers, and the words of the chachamim heal it. But he said there are some people who speak knives and daggers, means there are some people who speak, they say, nedarim, and that's knives and daggers. People who say you're not supposed to be promising things, not supposed to be making vows. If you do, you should be punished by being stabbed with knives and daggers. But good for you, the chachamim know how to take nedarim off. So he said, did you know how terrible it is to make nedarim? And he said, no, I never knew. So that was his excuse. That's how he got out of this neder in the first place. Okay, now the Gemara says, you're not allowed to pass by food on the road. Is that true? So Rav Yochanan quotes Rav Shimon Yochai, says that was only in the early generations where the Jewish women did not do witchcraft, and therefore you could pick up the bread. You don't have to worry that there's a witchcraft involved. Nowadays, that everybody's involved in witchcraft, even Jewish women. You never know. A loaf of bread on the side of the road might have some witchery associated with it. If you pick it up, you'll be under its influence. So don't pick up a piece of bread on the side of the road. That could be dangerous. The Gemara says that's only by whole pieces of bread. Witchcraft doesn't apply to pieces of bread, only whole loaves of bread. The Gemara says, is that true? Rav Asi said Rav Ashi. But we have a pasuk that says "V'tachalelena." I see al ami b'shalei sa'ir uvitute lechem. We see that they violated me, Hashem says in Yecheskel, with pieces of bread. So you see that they did do things with pieces of bread. Gemara says that pieces of bread wasn't that they put witchcraft in the piece of bread, that was they received payment for their witchery by receiving pieces of bread as their reward. That's something else. That's not what we're referring to.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.